2020 meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Tonight we'll be following the published and posted agenda. I would like to remind everyone, pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law Chapters 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Town of Chelmsford Finance Committee will be conducted via remote participation for the greatest extent possible. Specific information, the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.chelmsfordma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by accessing the Chelmsford Telemedia website at www.chelmsfordtv.org. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event they were unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. I would also like to note that if you would like to watch this meeting but do not plan to present to the committee or speak during public comment, we ask that you please do so at live.chelmsfordtv.org or on your television on the Comcast and Verizon channel. By doing so, you will help reduce demand on the online meeting platform and possibly avoid any bogging down of the system. Finally, I'd like to remind anybody participating that all direct messages are recorded in a public record, including direct private messages. Having said that, I'd like to move our first item on the agenda, approval of minutes. Pam, we have two sets to approve.
Hi, sorry, I had to unmute myself. Yes.
Okay.
You have March 5th and 12th.
Thank you. For March 5th, do I have a motion?
Jim, these came out tonight and I haven't looked at either one of them, so
okay.
I apologize.
That's all right. Let's see. We have Vicky.
I've read them.
David, have you had a chance to read them?
Sure. Make a motion that we approve the minutes of March 5th.
Yeah. Unfortunately, seeing the rest of the people that are on, I don't think we have a quorum to vote on either set of minutes, so I think we're going to have to push those off to our next meeting.
All right.
All right. Next on the agenda is the general discussion of plans for town meeting and the revised meeting schedule. Those who saw the tri-board meeting last week at this time saw that it was decided and discussed that we would do a town meeting on June 22nd, Monday at the PAC Center. More information is being provided by the town on that. You can check the website and also view the publication of that meeting on the town's website and on Chelmsford Telemedia. More information will be forthcoming and postings will be made concerning that. As far as our revised meeting schedule, we also discussed that evening that we are on a much shortened timeline based upon the fact that we have a lot to go through on a revised budget and a warrant schedule that is being presented on June 22nd. And seeing as we need to get our recommendation out in a timely fashion so that it may be digested and reviewed by town meeting members, we will be going through the agenda this evening, reviewing our the budget as revised, the capital plan as revised, the any changes to warrant articles, and also our two school districts, which we did not have a chance to meet with, who are here this evening due to the COVID-19 shutdown. So, having said that, this evening we will be rushing, or not rushing, but going through briefly and quickly the budget as revised. And next week on the following meeting, I believe we will plan to review and vote our recommendations, so that we might timely provide our recommendations to everyone else. Next on our agenda this evening, we have the review of the fiscal 21 budget for the Shelby Valley Technical School District. And with us this evening, we have their superintendent, Denise Pigeon, and I believe I see Jean Savoy is also on for the business manager for that, and also a couple of members of the school committee. So thank you and welcome, and thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Is it acceptable if I share my screen so that I can show you the PowerPoint?
Yes. Hold on.
Okay. And given the fact that you are on a tight timeline, I promise you that I will go through the slides very quickly, and I will focus mainly on the financial slides. I'm going to, oh, I can't share just yet.
Yeah, hold on 1 second.
Okay, it looks like it's working now. So I am sharing my screen with the presentation. And again, yes, with us tonight, we do have Jean Savoy, our business manager, as well as members of our school committee. Sam Polton is with us, Claire Janot is with us, Dawn Eyre and Lawrence McDonald. In terms of, before we begin, I did have to take a moment. I'm sure you've seen a bunch of these on TV, the shout outs to the senior class. I had to do it. Congratulations to the class of 2020 from Neshoba Tech. 47 of these young men and women are graduating from and live in the town of Chelmsford. So I wanted to give a special shout out to our senior class. And also spotlight one of our seniors, which is DJ Frazier. He is from Chelmsford, an electrical student. He is in our co-op program, works for Mass Electrical Contractors. He's also one of our student representatives on the school committee. Had to give a special shout out to him. And as I said, I'll go through many of these slides quickly. You've seen them in the past. You know that we are a regional technical school district made up of 8 towns. Thank you to the town of Chelmsford for being one of our founding members 50 years ago.
All right, yeah.
In terms of updates and where the public can get information regarding our budget, we did rebrand our website. And on our website, in addition to our website, we have an app. You can download Neshoba Tech's app by visiting the App Store. And what we've done is we've actually added our budget book to our app. So anybody that's going to town meeting, if you want to have easy access electronically to our budget, you can download the app and view our overall budget presentation right under documents in the app or on our website. In addition, on our school committee page, which is under our board docs page, we've loaded up all of the financial information that folks might be looking for. That includes our audit, our end of the year audit, our end of the year report audit, our current financials for the current school year are up there. And I've also linked the video from the full budget presentation that we gave to our town officials back in February. So if somebody wants to go back and watch the full presentation, I know this tonight will be a bit abbreviated, that is available for any member of the public to view. In terms of our enrollment, overall enrollment is up by 18 students. In terms of how that breaks out into the different portions of our towns, of our 8 towns, Chelmsford has had the largest increase in students, or 14 additional students, and Chelmsford makes up 31% of the overall population of the student enrollment at Neshoba Tech. From a historical perspective of just Chelmsford, again, it is an increase of 14 students, which is driving the increase in the assessment this year, which we'll discuss. Looking back historically, again, it's our 50th year, so it was fun to look back at the 50 years of enrollment from Chelmsford. And just as a fun fact, Chelmsford's enrollment high at Neshoba Tech was back in 1976 with 313 students, and at the time, 3 of them were postgrads. I also look back at postgrad enrollment, and they have been attending Neshoba Tech since the school's inception. In 1969, we had 116 Chelmsford students, and 7 were postgrads. Our special populations enrollment, I share this with you every year. Very minor changes from year to year. It would be on par with what we have discussed in previous years. We also continue to do well with our school accountability, all of our factors. In addition, our follow-up study is also continuing to go very well. Our students are positively placed after they graduate. In terms of grants, I like to share this when we talk about the budget because we know that incoming competitive grants can help to offset the costs to the towns. So this summer we did have an award for a state safety grant where we were able to have some significant safety upgrades for a statewide grant. And we also received the 2020 Skills Capital Grant and were able to do some significant equipment upgrades in culinary and hospitality. We have 2 presidential scholars that went on for national recognition. One of them is from Chelmsford, Elliot Gale. We also did well at Skills USA. We also had another positive piece of information. We were designated as the first technical school in the state to be considered an early college high school. And now we'll get more into the budget slide, so I'll slow down a bit. I know that you have a big agenda tonight. When we were building the FY21 budget, again, we brought, with that beginning process, a lot of information to the table. We knew that funding changes were underway with the Student Opportunities Act, but we didn't quite know what that was going to look like. We also knew that we were working on a multi-year adjustment plan to wean off of such a significant use of one-time funds on our budget. And this is something we've been talking about over several years, so that we wouldn't use up all one-time funds too quickly and then have significant increases in town assessments. So we've been working on an incremental plan to address this. We're also focusing on our ongoing capital needs. And last year when we talked, we had discussed how it's important for us to keep thinking about OPEB moving forward. So we went into the budget development process with this in mind. We moved forward with building a budget that was a level service budget. We have added no new positions to this budget. It is exactly the same number of folks as we had last year. The budget itself, the increase that you'll see, represents contractual increases and other increases in fixed costs that are not necessarily controllable, such as the amount of money that we must put forward to Middlesex retirement, other retirement costs, special ed needs that must be met, transportation needs, etc., health insurance, much of what you would see on the municipal side as well in terms of your mandatory increases. And we have a new utility service fee or stormwater fee that we must pay to the town of Westford, and other anticipated increases in vendor costs. So this is really what was driving the increase of Neshoba's FY21 budget increase. We do have savings that we have gone into the development of FY21 anticipating. We signed on with a pretty innovative agreement with Greater Lawrence Technical School. They had actually over-purchased some solar energy credits, and we were able to work out an opportunity with them, an agreement with them, and we are seeing significant savings in our energy expenses. We also had our students in electrical work with us to continue to move forward with replacing our lights with LED, which has provided savings. We have looked for additional partnerships in terms of athletics so that we can share costs with other districts. We had a very financially successful one this year with hockey. We've also been very aggressive with our skills capital grant requests, and we've been very fortunate to receive numerous grant awards, which has helped to offset our equipment needs. And again, the two grants that I had shared with you earlier in an earlier slide. We finished the MS project on time, which year in the fall. Since then, we've continued to do other projects in the building. We've worked really hard to reduce costs and provide real world experiences to our students. These are our electrical students running a wire as part of the safety grant that you had seen on an earlier slide. And these are our students working in dental and health. Last year, we received a dental and health equipment grant. And in addition to upgrading the equipment, we are renovating the space, and the students have been doing all of the work. In terms of capital needs that are reflected in the FY21 budget, again, it's major repairs that can't wait. We have to continue on an annual process of replacing portions of our fire suppression system over the course of, I would say, 3 to 5 years to get this project done. An interior and exterior lighting upgrade project, some upgrades to our technology infrastructure, and basically some parking lot and stairway repairs for safety. I always like to share with you where we stand with our stabilization fund and OPEB. Current balance in stabilization is just over 1.5 million, and our OPEB account is just over 750,000 and a liability of over 7 million. We are proposing to fund OPEB in the FY21 budget at 183,476 from excess and deficiency. This is the real bird's eye view of the budget. It fits nicely on a slide. I will show you the more detailed budget in just a moment. But from the bird's eye view, when you look at the overall expenses, again, this budget represents no new positions. This was fixed costs and required increases when we came forward with the FY21 budget. Overall increase of total expenses is about a 3.26% increase. The majority of those increases are in instruction. This document here, which I did email to Chairman Clancy, and it's also on our website, is the total expense budget, a little bit more broken out. And again, I apologize if it's hard to see on the computer screen, but you do have the document emailed to you. It has our FY 18 actuals, our FY 19 actuals, and then this year's budget and the proposed budget that we're speaking about today. So again, you can see that for the most part, we were able to level fund the majority of our expenses. In some cases, we just can't do that. There were some costs that you will see of increases. One of the larger ones is in instructional needs and technical equipment. Again, that's math textbooks that we desperately need. I would anticipate with an online component at this point. In addition, other technology needs such as your Chromebooks are in here as well. Smaller increases in student organization costs and retirement increases down at the bottom. Also an increase in debt, a slight increase in debt, which would be that new roof project. In terms of our funding sources, again, you see how is made up. It's from minimum contribution from the towns. In addition, what we are anticipating from Chapter 78, state transportation reimbursement. The unreserved fund balance is E&D. And again, this budget is representing the use of 100% of our E&D, as we have always traditionally done. And then this is how the assessment breaks out by town, so that you can see of our complete budget, 10,125,583 is made up of town assessments. The next slide is the real detailed look at Chelmsford's assessment for Neshoba Tech. So in putting Chelmsford's assessment for Tech into perspective with the overall town of Chelmsford budget, our assessment to the town of Chelmsford, I believe, represents approximately 2 to 3% of your overall town budget. And that is for FY20, FY21, 3,445,195,000. And that is an increase of 344,178. But you can see the majority of that increase has been driven by the town's minimum contribution. So over 300,000 of that increase is the increase in the minimum, which is due to the increase in the enrollment. The other increase that you'll see is the increase for the new roof project, the FY21 payment for the new roof project. And then the last piece that I wanted to share with you is, again, we have many public services at Neshoba Tech that the public can take advantage of. Unfortunately, some of these are closed at the moment, but I do want you to know Angel at Neshoba, our veterinary, is actually still open. So if any is in services at Angel, they are in fact still open, as they are an essential service. And that concludes the majority of my presentation, but I'd be glad to review any of the significant detail with you. I think you're muted, sorry.
Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question. This is Kathy. I don't know why I don't see myself, but did you give us the breakdown of enrollment by classes? Like, so that we know how many postgraduate students you have?
There are 4 postgraduates in this budget.
How many?
4.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I know this budget was voted on and set prior to everything else that occurred. I'm imagining you don't see any changes coming to this budget based upon the fact that it's based upon minimum contribution. Would that be an accurate statement? Well, the increase is based upon our minimum contribution calculation. Obviously, things have happened since this version of the budget was voted on by the school committee for Neshoba. I'm just wondering if you anticipate any changes coming either up or down in the next year that are going to affect this projection.
To be totally honest, we don't have any of that new information as of yet. So this would be the recommendation that we move forward with the budget as presented. But if there are significant changes that come forward, we would certainly bring that before our school committee to review.
Okay. we have any other questions? Seeing none. I'd like to thank you both, Denise, Jean, and also the school committee for being on this evening and presenting your proposed budget. And again, we welcome you back next week, should you so choose, because we do anticipate on discussing and voting on your budget.
And if I might just take one more moment, I did want to introduce to you, Michelle Shepard is on the screen as well. And as you know, Jean will be leaving us soon. She is retiring. We have found our replacement business manager, and that is Miss Michelle Shepard. She is currently working alongside Jean, and moving forward at these meetings, you'll be working with the two of us.
Welcome, Michelle.
Welcome.
Well, thank you all very much. And with that, we'll be moving on to the next portion of our agenda.
Thank you.
Right. Next on our agenda is review of the fiscal year 21 budget for the Chelmsford Public Schools. With us this evening, we have Superintendent Jay Lang. We also have our Director of Business and Finance, Joanna M. Johnson-Collins, and members of the Chelmsford School Committee. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
All right. How about yourself?
Pretty good. I do have some information to share with you this evening, and I didn't know, would you like me to share my screen too, just so that the public can?
Yes, please. I've allowed that. Yep.
All right, just give me 1 second. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so just a couple of highlights for you before we get too deep into this. We've kind of followed a traditional budget process that we've followed for the last few years. The school department started working on putting the budget together in the fall, right around Thanksgiving. And then typically what ends up happening is between Thanksgiving and then sometime in mid to late January, the administration of the schools, the staff work on putting together our recommendations for the year. I made a presentation to the school committee at the first meeting in February, before February vacation, with a recommended budget of $63 million for next year. It was a $2 million increase over our current figure. I'd worked at the time with the town manager around that recommendation, and I felt that would serve the schools well, and he felt it was within the fiscal kind of realities of the town at that point. So that is the budget that I presented to the school committee again in early February. The school committee, the last meeting in February, right after February vacation, did deliberate on the budget. We went page by page through, asked questions, were able to talk through the different recommendations, and the school committee ultimately recommended that budget the last meeting in February. I was then able to meet with the subcommittee of the Finance Committee in early March before we all went out on the closure, and we were slated to have come before the full Finance Committee, I think the Thursday after, somewhere around the 19th or 20th of March, after everything kind of shut down. So we didn't have the opportunity to come before you. And then obviously things have changed financially, projection-wise, since that date. But what I'm going to do for you this evening is review the $63 million budget that was recommended to the school committee, approved by the school committee, to be forwarded to the Finance Committee and town meeting. And then I will be recommending some alterations to the budget next Tuesday at the regular school committee meeting, to come in line with the town manager's recommendation for some reductions to both the school department and town budget, given some of the, I guess, the fiscal realities we're now starting to deal with after the closure, reopening of the state, uncertainty with regard to state funding and whatnot. But I have not been able to make those recommendations to the school committee yet. So I didn't feel it was really appropriate to recommend them at this point to the finance committee. So tonight I'm going to review with you the $63 million budget. And like I said, I'll come back next Thursday at your meeting and very briefly just walk you through what I present to the school committee, and then hopefully what the school committee will approve, and can do that for you next Thursday evening. So in the budget document that you received, again, you're going to find the format is very similar to what we've been using for the last number of years. It's been well received both inside the school department and I believe within the community. It's a pretty readable document. I'm going to skip right up to page 12. Certainly, if individual members have questions, we can go back. The first 12 or so pages of the budget talk a little bit about the Chelmsford Public Schools academically, how we stack up against our comparable districts in the state, financially, how we stack up against those districts. But in the understanding the time constraints, wanted to just pop right to page 12, if you don't mind. And we'll actually walk through the budget overview and some of the assumptions that we built into this year's budget. So stop me along the way if you'd like. If not, I'm just going to review these various bullets with you and then walk you through the document itself. So the first thing we have done within this budget is we accounted for all of our collective bargaining agreements. We are in a good position. All of our employee contracts have been settled, and they were settled prior to this closure. So we're actually fortunate for that. So we know in fiscal 21 what our baseline figures are going to be salary-wise. So this budget does include all of our step increases, any known lane changes. That would be an individual who might be moving from like a master's degree to a master's plus 30, or a master's degree to a CAG, something along those lines. We've been able to account for all of those costs within this budget document. We also are reflecting in the second bullet a anticipated decrease in special education tuition costs. That actually is helpful. And, you know, one of the things we'll talk a little bit about later is we do have some funding in this budget for some new programming and some new positions to support that programming, very similar to what we began about 2 years ago at this point at the South Row Elementary School. We noticed that we had a need for an in-district therapeutic behavioral program, and at the elementary school level, we didn't have that. So we worked very hard to develop that. We call it our Strive program at South Row Elementary. In the last 2 years since opening that program, it's actually gone very well. We haven't had the need to actually have any children attend out-of-district placements at the elementary level that would be properly served within that Strive program. But one of the issues that we actually have is if we now don't develop a complementary program at the middle school level, we have programming in place for elementary school kids who are now ready to move up to middle school. And if we don't have that same program for them to begin to feed up into, they would really just go right from that elementary program to out-of-school placements. You know, obviously that's something that, you know, we wouldn't like to do. We've seen the program work very well. We're actually controlling costs within the district by doing that. We don't want to then just have a pipeline from elementary to middle school programs. So we are, again, anticipating a decrease in our out-of-district sped costs, which I think is very good. At the time the budget was prepared, we were anticipating an increase in circuit breaker reimbursement. I honestly don't know what will happen at this point because there were two different elements with circuit breaker. There was a tuition reimbursement element, and then there was also, under the Student Opportunity Act, there was a transportation reimbursement component. I don't think it's likely that the transportation reimbursement component will come through at this point. We're hoping for the full funding on the tuition side. We are still going to remain with the $375,000 anticipated increase because it really is an unknown, and it would all be handled within the circuit fund at this point is approaching about $3 million. So we have really worked hard over the last 4 years to build up a good cushion in that fund. So I'm going to recommend we keep that offset for this point until we actually see what happens budget-wise. The budget does have a decrease in school choice funds because we are now utilizing the school choice funds to pay for the one-on-one computer initiative, which we'll talk a little bit about later as well. So we're directly earmarking any of the school choice revolving funds that we receive on an annual basis to pay for the leases for that program. This past year was the first year of the program. We outfitted all of our incoming 5th and 9th grade students with their own Chromebook device. with the thought process and plan that the student will keep the device for 4 years. So they'll keep it in, 5th grade right through middle school. At the end of middle school, they would turn it in, they would get a new device for high school, and they would keep it for 4 years. Doing some analysis of our school choice funds, we know that we have sufficient funds to be able to support a lease, a 4-year lease, basically at 2 grade levels each year. So that's why we made the decision to go at the kind of the natural transitions, 5th and 9th grade. So this year's 5th and 9th grade kids will keep their device and move up to 6th and 10th grade. And next year's incoming 5th and 9th grade students will be provided with a new device from the district on a new lease. So we'll actually have half of our students in the district, grades 5 through 12, have a district issued device next year, which I think is great. And again, in another 2 years' time, after the 4 years has elapsed, we're now going to be on a cycle where every student in the district, grades 5 to 12, is going to have their own district issued device. And we're able to fund that through school choice funding, which isn't going to have an impact on the local budget. So I'm actually very happy that we're able to do that. The offsets between the sped decrease in tuition and the increase in circuit breaker had about a net decrease of about $400,000 in that special ed tuition line when we get there. Next bullet, the third bullet, this is going to be the fourth and final year of our kind of reduction at the McCarthy Middle School of the split team. So based on student enrollment, we were carrying an extra 2 classrooms at the McCarthy Middle School in 5th through 8th grades. We realized a couple of years back that we could actually go down to 8 grade levels, 8 classrooms at each grade level in the school, and we had to phase it out, however. So 3 years ago, we eliminated 2 of the 5th grade positions. The following year, we did 2 of the 6th. Last year, we did 2 of the 7th. And then next year, we'll eliminate 2 of the 8th grade positions, so that McCarthy and Parker will actually have an identical number of teachers at each grade level. They'll each have 8 sections. We're able to do that, reallocate those 2 teaching positions elsewhere in the district, which you'll see a little bit later where we have need, and still maintain very favorable class sizes at the middle school level. So next year marks the completion of that initiative. The next bullet on the page, we are obviously, and I think it's actually kind of timely given the remote learning that we were encountering this particular spring. We are adding a couple of technology support positions in the district. One is an additional instructional technology specialist at the district level to help out between middle school and high school. And then we actually have 2 ITS positions now in the middle schools. One's at Parker and one is at McCarthy, where we're adding 2 technology assistant positions. So this will actually be a person who would be assigned to the computer lab to be able to help see classrooms to free up the ITSs in those 2 buildings to really go out and support teachers implementing different technology initiatives that they have in the school. These positions are, again, going to be invaluable going forward next year in any kind of a remote learning environment that we have. Our teachers obviously are doing a fantastic job, but they certainly need the supports, and these positions are going to help with that. Next bullet, we are recommending the addition of a few additional special education teachers based on numbers and IEP levels at the elementary schools. So 3 of our elementary schools, the Byam, the Center, and the Harrington, each need an additional special ed teacher to maintain the appropriate levels of support. We are seeing, in particular this year, a large number of students moving up from CHIPS to the elementary level. So these positions are actually going to be critical, helping in the kindergarten, 1st grade level at those 3 schools. I talked a little bit earlier about creating a complementary behavioral program, a STRIVE program at the middle school level, and that's what these next few bullets address. This is going to be a mirror of the elementary level programming, where there will be a BCBA or board certified behavior analyst to help oversee and run the program. A dedicated special education teacher at the program. Again, this complements what's happening at South Row. There's also a school psychologist component that's included in the program. And these are direct supports for those kids, again, who are going to be coming from South Row up to the McCarthy Middle School. I think that program really will want to set it off properly. I think it's going to be very well received. Next bullet on the top of page 14, an additional part-time LPN position at the high school. This actually, again, has to do with recommendations around caseload. We currently have 2 full-time RNs at the high school with no additional LPN or even part-time RN support. And if you look at our model at the elementary and then the middle school, each of our middle schools has a full-time RN and they each have a part-time LPN. So the same number of kids in the middle schools are at the high school, but the high school actually just has the 2 RNs. There are some significant needs at the high school medically. We're also dealing with a significant number of field trips that need to have students' medical records reviewed before the kids go out on the field trips, help with the different sport teams around protocols with regard to physicals and making sure kids have proper immunizations and whatnot at that level. So we really felt adding an additional part-time LPN at the high school was not necessary. At the high school also, 2 years ago, we phased out the Latin program because of a lack of interest on the student part. We really need to add, we would like to add a 3rd language at the high school. So we have French and Spanish now. When we did a survey of staff and students, the language that was most prevalent and most wanted to see was actually the addition of American Sign Language, or ASL. So we are trying to recruit, it's not easy, but we're trying to recruit ASL teachers at this point to consider adding that language at the high school. There would also be the possibility of doing some programming at the middle school level as a feeder for the high school, but it would all be encompassed within that full-time position. Next bullet just deals with class size. So we have actually had a little bit of an uptick in class size at Center Elementary School for the last 2 years. It started out 2 years ago in 2nd grade. This past year, 3rd grade, numbers have remained large. So we'd like to add an additional 5th teacher for that 4th grade section at Center. They have a number of bubble classes at Center, so they're actually going to need this 5th teacher in the 4th grade for foreseeably at least the next 3 years. So I think it makes a lot of sense with the numbers we're seeing in 3rd grade right now to implement that for next year. And then we're completing our kindergarten registration. I don't have the final numbers because today was the last day, but we do know that our kindergarten numbers are up again. We originally built the budget based on 4 sections or 4 classrooms in each elementary school, but I have included support funding for 2 additional teachers to go to whichever school we determine may need them after we're completed our kindergarten enrollment. So we'll know that more actually, hopefully tomorrow over the weekend, we'll be able to analyze that and take a look at adding those positions. The budget contains, these aren't benefited positions, but we do include some line item in the budget to add some tutoring support services at the elementary and the middle school level to augment some of the Title I intervention money that we receive. So that is included in the budget. Again, it's not a particular number of positions, and these positions don't have benefits, so there's no benefit cost to the district. It's just hourly tutoring type or interventionist type positions. Again, not going to affect benefits, but we did make a couple of tweaks to some of our daily rates. Our day-to-day substitute teacher rate, we're recommending going from $75 up to $90 a day to be a little bit more competitive with some of our other local districts. Finding quality day-to-day subs is a task anyway, but it's become very difficult because our $75 rate has actually fallen behind other communities. At the very end of the budget book, I'll point out to you that we have a section with various reports and data behind these recommendations. So you can actually read a memo if you'd like to talk about why we're making some of these adjustments and how we would then fall into line with our neighboring towns. The day-to-day nurse sub rate is also slated to increase from 130 to 150. Again, I think this actually has a lot to do with just where we live in our locale. It is very difficult to attract day-to-day nurse substitutes if we need them, because again, people can pick up an extra shift at a local hospital, or we're so close to Boston. We're in high competition for this. And even going from the 130 up to 150 a day, it's still not going to be a guarantee that we can, get every sub we need for positions, but certainly it's going to be a step in the right direction. I mentioned earlier, we're going to utilize the school choice money to be able to continue year 2 of the one-on-one computer initiative. So all incoming 5th and 9th grade students at the McCarthy and Parker middle schools, as well as Chelmsford High School, will receive a Chromebook issued by the district for next year. Again, after this implementation, half of grades 5 to 12 will have the Chromebook. I think being able to do this and utilize school choice money and not have to impact the local budget is significant. So we're happy we're able to budget for that. And then lastly, last year we made some reductions to some of our fees. And this year we're continuing it. And I actually probably think it will stop at this. But we recommended, we've included money within the budget to be able to reduce student activity fees at the middle school to really try to encourage maximum participation from $75 a year. We're reducing that by $25 down to $50 a year. Parents have been very thankful for us doing that and kind of not adding a lot of extra fees on. And the schools are seeing really good participation. And we don't want, finances to be a barrier to kids participating in any of these after-school clubs and activities. I think the $50, again, someone asked if I would actually just eliminate the full fee. I think it's actually nice to have a little bit of buy-in. I don't think the $50 for a year is going to be prohibitive to any student, participating outright. We do have programs where we can provide a waiver for a student if they qualify for, say, free or reduced lunch, things along those lines. We would always work individually with the student and their parents to, waive a fee for them so that they could participate. But I think having that buy-in provides a little bit of incentive for participation. So we will likely keep that going forward. But I think the reduction, again, from 75 to 50 is warranted. And then lastly, in closing, I just talk about how we have the $2 million increase. We're able to maintain all of our services that were included in the previous budget and continue to add some programming initiatives in the district that I think are aligned with our district goals and initiatives. I think set us up really well as a community to continue moving forward with our programming, and was very happy to be able to produce this. Document-wise, when you move to page 16, this is kind of the summary document for all of your different Department of Ed accounting codes. So this is the summary level totals that the school committee ultimately in the end approves. As you can see, at the time we went from 61 million to 63 million. And then beyond page 16, you actually have the individual pages that all feed up to that main document. So the school committee, did work through the document. They reviewed pages 17 all the way to the end, page 52, line by line. They ultimately did vote to approve the budget and to move it forward to the Finance Committee and town meeting. Towards the end of the budget, I don't want to scroll on the computer screen here and make everyone dizzy, but we kept the same format. So we have the staff salary book, which kicks in at page 53. And that's an itemization of every position we have in the district with all the different salaries kind of tied to it. And that again feeds up to the main budget document. And then lastly, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. We kept our appendices at the back of the budget book consistent as well. You have a report on Appendix B, which is on page 73, that talks a little bit about the student clubs and activities and where the fees are derived from. Appendix C on page 76 is your grant fund summary. So that goes grant by grant through the district and talks about how much personnel we have, expense lines and whatnot, whether they're competitive or they're allocation grants. Page 79 kicks in a report on the revolving and the other fund summaries. This is a report that the school committee receives on a monthly basis, and then Joanna updates it on a quarterly basis in our financial report that we forward to the Finance Committee to talk about all of our different revolving funds, initial balances, how we're tracking year to date, and what we expect for finances at the end of the year. Lastly, Appendix E on page 81, we actually worked with Roger Hatch, a retired finance executive from Department of Ed this past fall, to do a kind of a comprehensive dig into Chapter 70, the town of Chelmsford, how it's impacted. So we incorporated that whole report into the back of the budget this year, just for interested parties. If someone really wants to get deep into where the numbers come from, that report is there. And then I alluded to earlier, if anyone wanted information specific to the new positions of programming that we've included within the budget, Appendix F, which begins on page 113, are some memos from our individual department heads that just provide some of the background information about the recommendations we made, whether it was increasing the day-to-day sub rate from 75 to 90 or the nursing rate from 130 to 150. You have rationales and recommendations included in that appendix of the budget. So long story short, that is the budget document that we reviewed over the last few months. Obviously, I'll be going back to the school committee again next Tuesday and talking about making some tweaks to the budget plan while really keeping our programs and services as unharmed as possible. And then I'm happy to come back to you briefly next Thursday night, not to tie up too much of your meeting, but to be able to talk you through the different elements of the plan, answer any questions you may have, and get ready to go to town meeting I guess 2 Mondays from then. So
Excellent.
that
Thank
is
you.
our budget.
Thank you, Jay. I know members of the finance committee, at least the ones who were there in the last meeting that we had in public, March 12th, we do have our budget books. But where's the easiest place to find this information for those that may be watching at home?
It's, excuse me, it's posted right to the Chelmsford Public Schools website. So if you go to the main site and you click on the finance tab, business and finance, it's listed as a document right on the front page of the business and finance page.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank
And thank you again for agreeing to come back next week. Just give us an update on what you discussed with the school committee this week and next. And we understand that numbers changed and you're working to come into that recommended new number. I believe that Paul will address that a little later on. We did talk about it at the tri-board last week.
Correct. Jim, just so you know, at the time the budget was approved, I did email a copy to all the different town meeting reps. So they do have at least the PDF copy of the budget. As soon as the school committee and this board takes a look at our recommendations that'll be going to town meeting, I'll send out an updated link to the town meeting reps so that they have a new comprehensive book. And then we'll also print copies for that evening as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. Do we have any questions?
I have a couple questions.
All right, Amina.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right. Jay, when you come back next week with the new numbers for the budget, are you also going to come back with some new actuals?
We don't usually report the actuals for the current year until the year closes. I do have in the third quarter financial report, we had done a year-to-date budget report. Joanna had also prepared a budget projection for fiscal 20
Right.
going to end. So that is only within about a month old. This is the time of the year that we're running all of our updating of purchase orders, closing out POs for end of year. We've only got 2 payrolls left, so we're going to have a lot of activity on payroll over the next week or two. I certainly can provide you with an updated year-to-date budget report. Tomorrow will be the last day of May. So normally I would present that to the school committee early next week. I don't think we'll probably run it until Monday or Tuesday, to be honest with you. But once that hits, I could send that out before next Thursday's meeting if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Just to see how the change in things has affected some of the numbers like the food services and transportation and things like that.
Yeah, no, that's going to be a component of our recommendation. So that will be something we're talking about next Thursday night.
Also, then I just had some questions. I don't think these are things that are going to apply to the stuff that you're going to discuss next Thursday, but for next year, and it might be something that you discuss. Are we going to build into the budget now that the world has sort of changed? Mm-hmm. Are we going to build into the budget additional cleaning supplies for the classrooms? Because up until this point, it's been the parents' responsibility to supply the teachers with Clorox wipes, Purell, hand wipes, things like that. Is that going to continue, or is the school department going to start supplying them if they become the recommendation by the governor's office?
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably end up seeing a little of both. Even this past spring, during flu season, we have particular chemicals that we like to use in the buildings that we have our day custodians and also the evening custodians utilize. We had, again, during flu season, and even as we were coming into the coronavirus at the end of February and early March, we had outfitted each of our classrooms with, spray bottles with a particular disinfectant that we as a district like to use. So we'll obviously continue with that. Our own staff will be, more regularly, cleaning things and disinfecting even during the days. So we really do like people to use our cleaner for that product. I do think you're always going to find teachers that are going to ask kids to bring in, boxes of tissues, things like that, to kind of contribute to the class. But no, I mean, we wouldn't be expecting families or parents to provide any of the industrial grade materials that, we as a district are going to be providing. We are starting to form, working groups to kind of take a look at what reentry is going to look like, all of the different requirements around obviously cleaning products and PPEs, and, how do you access them, who's going to provide them, what are the costs. I don't have definitive answers for you yet, but I know that's going to be part of our reality going back next September.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And Jim, I just had one quick question. I was wondering if you could redirect us to the grant summary page, please.
The grant fund summary begins on page 76. It's the appendix C, page 76.
Thank you.
And then the revolving funds start on 79. Could you hear me?
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, okay.
All right, do you have any other questions?
All right, I just have a couple. I was doing this on the fly, so I apologize if I didn't get the pieces. But in looking at the headcount additions in your bullet summary at the beginning, or when you started on page 12 or 13, I thought I had added up 9.7 FTE, and then in the appendix F, it looks like there's 7.7. Am I missing, what the actual change in headcount is?
In which appendix?
Appendix F, which you mentioned, laid out the new positions and the rationale. It looks like there's 7 kind of covered there, but I thought if I went through the bullets, I got to 9.7. So I don't know if I'm missing something, or not everything is included in Schedule F, in Appendix F.
No, because if you look at page 16, the FTE increase is 10 even. So I would have to go through, if you'd like, Schedule F and kind of tease that out. But these were all local funded positions, local operating budget positions. So within the staff salary book, Appendix A, that all crosswalks up to the main document and then the summary level totals. So you should see 10 full positions in there. You are
Okay.
now, a couple of them were reductions.
Yeah.
But we're like shifting teaching positions around to where the needs are.
Okay. Yeah, and I did. I took a quick. Again, I did this on the fly where you were talking and I was listening. But I went through the Appendix A with the schedule, the staff changes, accounting for the pluses and the minuses, and this was a ballpark kind of rounded number, but about $720,000 in total of an increase just in the salary line for all the, the adds and the minuses that were all in red in Appendix A. I'm just curious, given the, 10 position increase in FTE and that much of a budget increase, was there a change in enrollment? I didn't see enrollment figures in the document. Again, I haven't read it in detail, but that's a pretty big increase, it seems like.
It is. I think, the two real, well, there's kind of 3 drivers around that, but the 2 major drivers are the additional positions for special education. We do, like I said, we have a significant number of students who are moving up from our CHIPS integrated preschool program to the elementary schools next year. And when you take a look at the services that are required in the IEPs, when the students are now full-time in the elementary schools as kindergarten students, the service level is much higher. So 3 of the positions right out of the gate are going to special education at the 3 elementary schools. Again, I've got 2 positions that are kind of on hold at this point because we're just completing our kindergarten enrollment. And again, that's really just enrollment driven. If I didn't need to fill those positions after kindergarten enrollment was done, we wouldn't. I can tell you based on the numbers we've had for the last couple of years, and even the registration period we had this past January, again, I need to see what finished up today, but we've had to add those positions so that our K numbers are in the low 20s. We don't want our kindergartens approaching, the mid to high 20s, certainly. So we really want those kindergarten classes to be, as close to 20 or low 20s as we possibly can get. So that's like 5 out of the 10 positions right there. The other 3 positions right off the top of my head, again, are special ed related at McCarthy Middle School. It's to develop that complementary Strive program at the middle school level that we have at the elementary school level. And if we don't fund that at the middle school level and develop our own program in the district, then yes, I could save the cost on salaries, but I'm going to spend more on out-of-district tuition to have to send those students to out-of-district placements because we wouldn't have a comparable program for them in the district. We've done a very good job, and we actually have not sent an elementary school student out of district in the last 2 years because of that program at South Row. But we now need to build the complementary program at McCarthy because the kids are moving from elementary school up to middle school. So again, another 3 of the 10, so that only leaves the other 2. I would have to kind of think of where they are. But those 7 out of the 10 positions are directly related to service needs, students' IEPs. And if we don't develop those programs, I'm going to have to take that money and add it to out-of-district tuition because it would be like a pipeline for those kids to go right out. I can go through this if you'd like. I just need a few seconds to kind of figure out where those other couple of positions were. But everything in the cover summary and the staff salary book are linked back to this document. So I know they net out to 10 new positions.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
7 out of those 10 are right there on SPED.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to give it a more thorough read. If anything pops out, we can circle back next week. So thanks for coming back in next week.
Send me an email or give me a call in the interim. I'd be happy to walk through with you.
Thank you.
Sure.
I did have one quick question. I'm looking at page 16, and I'm sorry if I didn't ask this before, but it under I think it's like textbooks. There would seem to be like a $200,000 textbooks and instructional materials. So I went from last year's budget of $522,000 to the 2021 budget being $795.
Yep. You did ask me that.
I did. I'm sorry, I can't remember.
You're consistent. You asked me before. No, that's related to the new literacy program at the elementary school level. We need to adopt a new elementary literacy program. So grades K through 4 are actually getting a new literacy series. So we included a $250,000 line item in next year's budget to be able to contribute to that. We knew it was going to be about a $750,000 purchase, and I was going to be using about $500,000 in FY20 funding to be able to add to that program. And then we were carrying the $250 next year to be able to finish the adoption. I will tell you, and I don't think it's a surprise to anyone because I did recommend this to the school committee at their last meeting. We were able to actually negotiate a very good deal with the textbook company, and the purchase ended up coming in around $650 instead of closer to $750 or $800,000. And I was able to move money within the fiscal 20 budget to make that purchase now. So the school committee approved our budget recommendations for transfers. We moved that money within fiscal 20, and we've already made the purchase. So part of my ability to kind of close the $1.3 million gap next year is we are going to be reducing that line item by $250 because I've already made the purchase. So, and again, the school committee knows of that one because we talked about it at the last meeting, but that will be one of the factors that gets reduced. And then that brings the year over year spend to be much more consistent.
Donna, you had a question?
No, actually, I wanted to address something that Mr. Chambers had brought up. One of the things that I wanted to mention to you and anybody who might be listening is the state law also dictates the student to staff ratio in special education. So not only do we have to make sure that we have enough staff available to be able to provide the services, we also have to make sure that we stay within that ratio of staff to students within special education classrooms. The other thing I wanted to mention too, it's been a big concern for, I think, the school committee is going into next year. making sure that we're able to address the social and emotional needs of our students. I think that this remote learning process and everything associated with the coronavirus has been very, very stressful. And we don't anticipate that that stress is going to ease up in many ways. And so we want to make sure that we have the staff in place to be able to not only support our special education kids, but our general education kids as well, from whatever, issues, as I said, may arise as a result of this. And then to Ms. Langford's point, that actually the cleaning supplies are something that are definitely on our list of things to take into consideration. You're absolutely right. We have been very, very grateful to parents over the years for helping to contribute to classroom supplies, but we recognize that what we may be facing is going to go well above and beyond what it is that they've been so graciously donating, and that we need to be able to make sure that we have materials available to the staff to keep the classrooms clean and as virus-free as we possibly can.
Thank you for adding that. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Donna.
Do you have any other questions? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you for presenting today, Jay, and the school committee, and Donna for joining us as well. Look forward to taking a look at what you've reviewed and revised briefly next week. And again, as we acknowledge every year, we don't do you have budget line autonomy. We don't do a line-to-line vote, but we do like to see what the comprised budget is, so that we can make a proper recommendation. So thank you very much for your in-depth discussion, and we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Thank you.
again for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, up next on our agenda, we have review of the fiscal year 21 revised capital plan. John, I know we briefly discussed this last week at the tri-board meeting, but with us is the finance director, John Souza. Give a brief update as to what's coming off of that capital plan prior to jumping into the revised budget.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee, attendees. I have the presentation on my laptop, and I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and I will try to bounce to that. If I'm unable to get to Article 9 easily, I was going to ask if we may want to lead off with Paul's presentation, but let me attempt to get to Article 9. I'm just going to, I have it, let's see. Okay. Don't want to make everyone dizzy. We're just going to go through a few slides here to, okay. So back when I spoke with the Finance Committee, made a presentation back in February, which seems like a long, long time ago. You recall that the recommendation from the Capital Planning Committee was a total plan that was just over $3.8 million, and it funded 17 projects. And although those were all very worthwhile projects, a lot's transpired since that time that we last got together in person. As we discussed the tri-board meeting last week, we took a hard look at the capital plan, recognizing that we do have to borrow each year to fund it. And so when we got together, the financial team got together, and what we tried to do is really pare down the capital budget and only include those items of the absolute highest priority that relate to either public safety, security enhancements, or allowing projects that were already underway in this fiscal year or prior fiscal years to be completed. So just to go through those with you briefly, this is a summary of those projects. I'm just going to go on to the next screen. And what you see here is just to go through these with you, all of the projects that are not being funded of the revised capital budget are shown that they are lined out, or they have strike-through line through them. So you can see that the projects that we're recommending that go forward at town meeting would include the security cameras for the municipal IT department, a storage project that the town clerk has been overseeing for the past few years. This is going to fund disaster preparedness for the records management and also data lines to an area where a lot of public records are kept. The kitchen renovation, as everyone knows, is badly needed at the senior center. That's original to that building. It dates back to the 80s. The library computers, this is really critical because really everything they look up now, you know, everyone, the public and staff, computers are just such an unbelievable part of our world. As we discussed back in February, the public safety repeater upgrade project that's going to benefit both police and fire. Those hardware items are 20 years old and will no longer be supported after next December. And then the mobile radio upgrade for the fire department, that's going to completely replace the mobile radios and the trucks, and also the portable radios that all of the firefighters and staff carry that were last done in 2011. So they are becoming dated. If we go to the next screen, the projects, and I'll just highlight that are going, that we're recommending go forward, would be for Public Works, the GIS data upgrade. This is being split evenly between the general fund, the stormwater enterprise fund, and the sewer enterprise fund. The cost is $50,000. Based on feedback that was discussed between school administration and the school committee at the tri-board, we have included money for the Parker School code compliance items, which are basically include washable ceilings, a non-slip floor surface for the kitchen and prep areas, and enhancements to the hood, kitchen hood system, which involves ventilation in the kitchen areas. That's $122,928. And also the kitchen upgrades that I mentioned last week for $188,000 at Byham, Harrington, and South Row. That's going to fund all overruns that occurred when bids came in for the project that's already been started. And then finally, at Chelmsford High School, there's a number of security and surveillance upgrades that are going to take place at a cost of $270,000. So the new revised capital plan is a reduction of $2.33 million from the original plan, and the total that would be proposed to borrow is just $1.472 million. So that kind of sums up, you know, the revised plan as we have it. I'd be glad to answer any questions if there are any from the committee.
Does anyone have any questions?
John, do any of these deferrals pose any risk for, you know, increased cost, you know, down the road? Or I'm assuming things like, you know, the kitchen upgrade certainly needed, but I can't see us not doing that, you know, this year is going to have a downside or put us at risk for something other than, you know, maybe cost of living increases or inflation next year. But do we have any, you know, with the vehicles being deferred or anything else, does that pose any risks?
I wouldn't say risks. I mean, what it does do is it lowers, you know, the cost that we have to borrow for these items. I will say going forward, you know, the trucks are definitely needed down the road. You know, in talking with our public works director, I mean, we're deferring road maintenance, which, you know, in years past, there's always roads that need repair. So I don't, you know, to answer your question, Eric, I wouldn't want to give the impression that these things are easy to defer. It's just, we're just trying to prioritize some of these. One of the things we looked at is the senior center. Basically right now, a lot of the meetings and programs that would normally go on are not taking place because of the coronavirus situation. They are still providing Meals on Wheels to seniors. So one of the considerations that the town manager and the finance team discussed was that maybe an ideal time to do it where the building is not being utilized right now as much as it once was, but recognizing that, you know, that will change in the months and years ahead. So that was one of the considerations there.
Yeah. If I don't know if I'm unmuted, if I could just elaborate a little on what John was saying, when the senior center kitchen gets done, this kitchen has to be shut down for a period of a few months. So it really, if there's any time to do it, we want to do it now while this place is closed, because there will have to be a significant effort to bring in meals if it were normal conditions. But to reiterate a concern that John mentioned earlier, and I know Gary Persichetti on this line, I mean, the one that's probably the concern is the road funding. I mean, we cut out $500,000 in road funding. We're now relying solely on Chapter 90, which is roughly 1.2 million. And if you may recall, the studies that were done by the Mass Municipal Association and others, that funding level is only about a third of what we should be putting into every year into our roads. And in fact, had this pandemic and economic calamity not occurred, we would have done this year what we did last year. We would have come back and asked the Finance Committee and, to support, and then go to town meeting, also with selectmen support, to use some of the unused snow and ice monies to put back into the roads like we did a year ago, because that was needed. It was well received. And obviously it's an opportunity that we've forgone this year. So, and then the final note on that is, here we are approaching June 1st on Monday, and thus far the legislature has not released the Chapter 90 funding for this current season. And I don't know what date that's going to occur. We'll keep being told it's in the works, it's going to happen. You have the governor on TV talking about now's the time to be investing in infrastructure, the blue line, everything else. Yet cities and towns can't go out there while the traffic is light and opportunities there to be making investments in our own road infrastructure. So again, the one that concerns me of all these is the road infrastructure. And I hope that if conditions do change, we keep hearing about an infrastructure bill from Washington or whatever for stimulus and so forth. It really would be the roadway network, because we have 230 lane miles of road, and it's just a frustrating thing, and we hear about it all the time.
Quick question, John. Aren't the borrowing costs very good right now?
Yes, the interest rates are low. It's just the principal payment will be a lot lower, David. So we're borrowing,
Yeah, but how much of the principal, how much are we going to end up saving in the budget year of 2021 by making all these cuts?
I'm estimating it roughly around at least about $100,000. And we've actually reduced the debt service budget by $200,000. Some of that's due to refund savings on a refunding we just did, but I would say for this capital plan, I'd say it's at least 100,000.
Well, but then the borrowing costs are really favorable right now, and you don't know what they're going to be down the road, but they're certainly not going to be much better. They're going to be, it's just when you don't invest in infrastructure. I don't know if this is the right place to save money.
Yeah, what I can say to that is you are correct that interest rates are very low, and it is a great time to borrow, as we just saw with the refunding. What this does is this helps us not reduces our principal payments, not only for 21, but for 22. So then, so for example, we take the roads. Roads are usually amortized over a 5-year period under state law. So that's 5 years of these principal payments not hitting the debt schedule, or more, like if it's a longer term project. So that's kind of what we're looking at, is not just 21, but we think 22 is going to be a very difficult year as well. So this lowers our debt service in 22 as well, and successive years.
Well, they're talking about potentially 5 years of impact based upon what's happening right now. And so I understand where you're coming from, John, on this, where those principal payments aren't going to be hitting, and a reduction here isn't just a reduction now, but a reduction for the next 5 years because we haven't made those borrowings. Although I think a favorable interest rate, it's going to be something that we can at least point to for the next 5 years or so.
Not only that, but if they're legitimate projects that they're going to have to get done, and deferring them may lead to other problems.
Yeah, there's no question next year's capital list is going to be backlogged. You're going to start seeing fire apparatus showing up again, and those are significant costs. So there's no question. But again, we're just in a tough spot, and maybe again, maybe this fall, if there is some stimulus in the year one of this multi-year crisis, then perhaps we can bring some of that back. That's going to be a big discussion is that if there is some outside relief, how do we utilize it? Because there'll be a lot of competing needs, including that of reducing the tax levy as part of those considerations. But I just think that when you've got 1 out of 4 people receiving unemployment or other assistance in the community, I think it's important that we tighten our belt right now, both practically and symbolically.
Well, I don't disagree with that, but I remain concerned about deferring infrastructure.
Definitely.
No, we can certainly discuss that next week when we make our recommendations, David.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions? Seeing none, we'll just hold on, maybe 1 second. Filtering through the participants. Seeing none, thank you, John, for the update. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm just, not to give everyone vertigo, I'm just going to scroll back in the presentation so that Paul can in the.
Now, John, are you going to continue to run the presentation or?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
I'll mute my control just so I'm not, so that Paul, I'm not interfering with Paul's audio.
Okay, perfect. All right, so with that being said, we move on to the next part of our agenda, review of the fiscal year 21 revised town budget. And as alluded to, we have Paul Cohen, the town manager here, and we do have on the line various department heads I can see that may need to or want to chime in at some point during this discussion. So thank you for being here this evening, and let's begin.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Finance Committee and those other in attendance and watching. A couple of thoughts before I get into the articles. One is, there was a question earlier about, corona-related expenses in schools and so forth. I just want to make the committee aware is that there is funding available to the town, and our town accountant, Darlene Lucier, is submitting reimbursements. I think that one is due next week. We have made available to the community through the federal and the state CARES Act. We have $3 million available for corona-related expenses. And what that means is it can't be things that were already budgeted for. It has to be directly corona-related. And so, we are recognizing those things. For example, we've had to bring on an employee to facilities to be in the town offices daily, washing the building, wiping door handles and so forth, constantly throughout the day to be in compliance with the safe work environment and state regulations. So those items do get reimbursed. And obviously, some of the adult meals that have gone out for Meals on Wheels and even through the schools and so forth, we will put in for those reimbursement expenses. And in fact, you're going to see another one of those tomorrow, unfortunately. DPW will be erecting at Hart Pond and at Barney Playground, basically what you'd call security fencing or, construction fencing, because the Board of Health has closed the beaches because of the health concerns that have taken place in the past few days this week regarding non-compliance with the guidelines from the state government in terms of masks and social distancing and so forth. So, for example, that's going to be like a $4,000 expenditure, but again, we'll get fully reimbursed on those expenses. So again, the COVID issues that arise in the future, we will be able to put in for reimbursement, not only this fiscal year, but the upcoming fiscal year. And there's also an effort to see if those monies can be a little relaxed on those standards, but we'll have to wait and see. Towards that, while I'm starting here, I want to let the committee know and the community know, we have reopened the town offices for doors to the public 2 days ago when we came back from the Memorial Day holiday. DPW and the reopening task force and everybody, emergency management and so forth, we put in the plastic shields and the floor markings and the office screenings and so forth. As you can imagine, it's not been the busiest of times, but we've had people in visiting the various offices, whether it's to cast early votes or pay tax bills or visit the building department and so forth. And also, I want to note the library also opened on Tuesday morning in accordance with the state guidelines for curbside collection and in terms of collection of materials for patrons. And I know our library director's on the line. I think she told me they had like 122 collections their first day. So again, I'm proud of the fact and pleased to announce, and it really was a tremendous undertaking by everybody from facilities to the department heads to the individual employees that we were able to resume as soon as the health conditions and the state regulations allowed. So that was a bit of good news for us. And the other thing, and while I can finish on that thought, one thing I think that's going to help us going forward is we do have a stable group of department heads who were with us during the Great Recession, of over a decade ago. So, people like John Souza and Gary Persichetti and Becky Herman and on and on and on. I mean, we're very fortunate to have had that stability. So we're very well equipped to address what's really ahead of us probably for the next few years. And so that gives me confidence. I hope it gives you confidence and the community confidence that we're well positioned. And I guess the last note before I get into the articles is, unfortunately, there isn't a lot of news out of the State House at this point. Monday is June 1st, as you noted. There's still no guidance in terms of budgetary issues regarding local aid. The revenue projections, as you can see, that I sent you one late this afternoon, keep deteriorating. And also, there's just sort of a sense that we're now entering town meeting season. And in fact, they haven't enacted the law questions about quorums at town meeting and so forth that didn't directly pertain to us. But again, we're still, as I mentioned earlier, we're still also awaiting the release of Chapter 90 road money. So again, at this point, what we have for you this evening in terms of the operating and so forth is I mentioned last week, it's a projection. It's as good as any, I guess, and it's something I think, again, it's clearer and clearer that this is going to be with us for a while, so we may as well get started with that. And with that, I'll get started with the presentation. What John has listed for you is a consent agenda. I've shared that with the moderator, John Perlin. What that basically means is a third of the 27 articles that will be taken up on the 22nd. We're going to ask that the town meeting take this group of 9 at one time, because they're repetitive to town meeting. They generally have not resulted in many questions in the past. And again, we'll ask the committee to move on that. And I'll go through those individually, but I just wanted to show that's what that first slide is what is our consent agenda. When you get into Article 1, which is just the reports, it'll be real brief. And so we'll immediately go to Article 2. Article 2 is what Darlene Lucy, our town accountant, presented to you last week in terms of the transfers that have to take place. Again, I'm seeking a transfer of $550 from snow and ice removal and $121,050 from the Finance Committee Reserve Fund, which will leave a couple $100 in the reserve fund that would go back to free cash. Or if there's something that arises unexpectedly in the few weeks after, week, 10 days or so after town meeting, we'd be positioned to. But bottom line is you have in the next slide, go to what the items are that are listed there. The 20,000 that Darlene pointed out in terms of the IT software and telephone expenses, the vehicle maintenance and recruitment expenses in public safety, the solid waste collection additional costs and office space construction that Public Works performed, the facilities personnel services when the facilities union decertified and then became part of non-union employees. They immediately transferred from 37.5-hour work week to a 40-hour work week, because that's what that was sort of the standard of what is functioned in Public Works at the highway and other divisions. So that's what transpired there. Again, a minor cost. And then there's facility expenses. There were significant costs with HVAC, as was detailed last week, elevator repairs and other miscellaneous costs. And then finally, the big number is the $257,000. That has to do with unemployment costs and workers' compensation insurance. And again, the unemployment thing is just so overwhelmed that we have some charges that we want to contest, but we just don't see that that's going to happen in the short term. So we may get credit them in the future, but we want to pay it now.
Paul, can I ask a question about the unemployment?
Sure.
Did we lay off people?
No.
No.
No, we did not. We did not undertake any reduction in personnel in the town. And we're seeing claimants we know who shouldn't be claimants. And John can probably speak. John, why don't you speak to what you're seeing on unemployment? John Souza, I'm sure. I know he muted himself. John?
Yes,
Yes.
it says I'm muted by Jim, would you be able to unmute me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, the town, just so everyone knows, the town and the schools, we share it. We actually have an unemployment consultant that specializes and they review all of the claims for accuracy and, and truthfulness and however you want to characterize it. But they do a great job doing that. They rely on they ask a series of detailed questions, either usually from the school human resources office and also the town human resources director. And unfortunately, there's been such an unbelievable amount of claims that have been filed with the state's Department of Unemployment Assistance. Unfortunately, at the state level, their first priority was just to shovel these claims through the system, just, process as many as they can. So our unemployment consultant has not even been able to contest these claims. I know, Dr. Lang's been on top of it. He's been asking me about different names and the level of claims. But at this point, we've just been unable to contest it. We will at some point, but our claims pre-COVID, our bill, I want to say, was under 2,000 a month or less. It was down to one of the lowest levels. They're going to be a little delayed on billing us, but we need to have this money because I can already tell you it's at least it's going to be at least 50 to 75,000 per month during since the COVID activity started in March. Has just been an unbelievable level of claims filed. So it's something we're going to work with our consultant to sort out as we go forward, and with the school department.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we can go on to Article 3. Article 3 is an article for funding collective bargaining agreements. We've reached agreement with the firefighters and the clerical unions. The Board of Selectmen is scheduled to act on that on Monday night. They'll go into executive session, then we'll come back out and take votes. So we'll have those for town meeting. Just to give you an order of magnitude, just give you a sense, you're probably talking about 300,000 for firefighters and probably 25,000 for AFSCME clerical. There's less than 10 clerical employees in the union, and obviously the firefighters is a significant number. So to give you an order of magnitude of numbers there. So again, we'll give you those numbers next Thursday, assuming all goes well. The clerical union has ratified. I believe the firefighter union is meeting tomorrow on their ratification vote. So Article 4 is the Neshoba presentation. You heard that earlier this evening, so we don't need to spend any time on that. And then followed by that is Article 5, which is the Chelmsford Public Schools, and Dr. Lang that just gave that presentation. So that brings us to Article 6, which is the general government operating budget. And I've sent you the Excel file, and I'll summarize it here in the PowerPoint. We list out the budget line items as traditional. The bottom line is that if you scroll, John, through the lines to the text box, you can see that again, we're obviously dealing with the uncertainty of the economic impact from COVID, but as we discussed last week, we got the 20% decrease, a $3.4 million decrease in local aid, a 14% decrease in 1.5 million in local receipts. And this is, again, reference to the 20 budget, not our projected level service budget. And then we're transferring 2 million from the general stabilization fund. If you go on the expenditure side, which is the next slide, the whole total budget expenditure increase is just over 0.5% or 758,000. So basically the budget goes from $137 million to basically $138 million for our operating budget. The Chelmsford Public School budget recommended increase is 1.1% or 667,000. And then the other general government departmental budget increases is roughly $400,000 or 1.3%. The big outlier, obviously, that trumps both of those is the benefits and insurance budget increase of 3.28% or 809,000. And that does incorporate the premium holiday, which we did receive official notice on that this week from Maya, that we will have that would amounts to a $500,000 savings in the health insurance budget. So that again is incorporated. And then, as John noted earlier, our debt budget service decreases significantly, and that includes excluded debt as well as non-excluded debt. So that number brings down significantly in terms of where we are. In terms of what we actually went into and to make adjustments from level service, and again, we sort of indicated those last week. We brought down snow and ice removal from $1.5 million to $1 million. We brought down other post-employment benefits from $1.5 million to $1 million. So again, we achieved $1 million of savings there. John spoke earlier about the $200,000 reduction in debt service. We also examined the overlay account for property tax. And what that is that's the amount that's set aside for abatements. You may recall a few years ago under municipal governmental reform, the legislature enacted a law that did away with individual fiscal year overlay accounts. So now it's an overlay fund that goes across fiscal years. And so we looked at what the liabilities are that are remaining and what we would need going forward into a reval year. And we're able to reduce that amount by $350,000. I think it's $550 is the amount we'll be appropriating this year towards meeting the accounts for abatements. Now, you might say, my gosh, aren't we going to receive a lot of abatements in the midst of an economic crisis? Well, this year we will not, because the valuations are as of January 1, 2020. So we believe our values are solid, and so we think we can get through the reval year with that amount, given a current balance going forward and the additional $550 we'll put in this year. And then we've made significant reductions in public safety overtime. And then we go into individual items. We'll be replacing fewer police cruisers, and then that's what we did. I mean, I went and I asked all the department heads to give me suggested areas for cuts. Went through them department by department, line by line. For example, I cut the legal budget by $20,000. We went through what we could do, but as I mentioned last week, there isn't a lot of wiggle there. As I've always stated, and I know it's true, we don't have extra staff. We're running very lean. As I said before, and I said last week, and I'll keep saying, and I'm sure I'll say at town meeting, the accounting department can't function if we were to cut a person in there. And the same thing, we have a veterans agent. You may recall, and I recall before we shut down the in-person hearings, Regina Jackson made a very clear and concise and compelling case that she needed an administrative assistant to support the veterans agent. She cited the other towns who have administrative support. Well, that's not in here. And again, she's a one-person operation. And that's really just illustrative. I mean, we're running the town manager's office with 3 people, myself, the assistant, and our administrative professional assistant. I don't know of another town our size that has 3 people running an operation. Yes, we have HR, but I don't know of another town our size that has an HR department of 1 person. And that's just the nature of how Chelmsford's been. I can't say that it's all a result of me. It was lean when I arrived here, and it's been lean, and that's what sort of worries me going forward with either deeper cuts this year or in the years ahead, is that there isn't fat to cut through. And I mentioned earlier concerns about road investment. They're all there, capital and even in operational aspects. So again, the budget, there are no new positions on the town side, 0. I mean, it's level service, but there are no cuts either. I just don't see where we could cut. I mean, you can go through the office. John can speak about his office and the collections. What people need to realize is, despite the economy, we have to assess the same amount of properties. We have to collect the same amount of bills. We've got to process the same amount of payroll and invoices and so forth. The veteran services caseload increases. Our community support services operator, another 1-person department, her caseload increases. Building department, they're busy, and even in it's just a very a streamlined operation. Again, what will happen is we'll continue into July with the new fiscal year. Hopefully this budget gets adopted, and we'll run as best we can. And when we regather by fall town meeting, if conditions allow for a fall town meeting, we'll assess where we are. We'll see better what the state has done with the with the local aid and the economic situation, we'll know by then whether there is federal assistance. But again, we'll keep our eyes towards a multi-year horizon, because it's not just going to be a V situation. I think, the scary one is when the comment that was in the article I sent today about, well, maybe it's more of an L instead of a V, meaning it's not going to bounce up. It's just going to remain low for a period of time. It's just amazing how, and sadly, as I mentioned last week, it's just put everybody in commercial development in pause. We were on the cusp of some economic development on the 129 corridor, and myself and our business development director and our economic development director, we were on calls this week, and the message we're getting back from companies is, well, we're reassessing what's going forward. And so tenants who were lined up are no longer lined up. And I'll give you some examples. We had, and this will be talked about at Monday night selectmen's meeting. We had grants awarded to do economic development, to do some amenities in the 129 corridor. Right now, 2 of those grant recipients, one has declined and one is not even getting back to us. So, the only activity you're really seeing right now is that one plaza on Mill Road. But the one parcel that was sold on 129, where the site was cleared and the property conveyed in March, there's nothing happening right there right now. And again, we're in discussions with folks along the corridor in terms of commercial tenants as well as amenities tenants. And right now, things are just, everybody's reassessing the situation, because it does appear to be a transformative change in terms of the whole work environment, in terms of work from home, commute, public transportation, suburban office park. We're sort of in a bit of a reassessment, particularly with it when in this pandemic where there's no cure for the COVID virus. So that's where we are in terms of where we're at. And again, I have department heads who are on the line. If you have any questions about the level of service or level of cuts that we're proposing here, as I mentioned earlier, it's a lot of nipping and tucking, and I think again we're able to maintain as best we can, but I don't see where we go from here without really seeing impact. So in terms of what the next step would be if it has to go beyond what's essentially almost a level dollar budget right now.
Paul?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I have a question on the public safety overtime and cutting almost $500,000 on that. That's a big number. How realistic is that truly to be able to cut that?
I'm going to let each of the chiefs speak, but a lot of it really depends upon factors that are almost out of their control in terms of, if we lose people to injured on duty, that has a big impact, and those positions have to be filled, and sick leave utilization, so forth. So again, we've got Chief Spinney and Chief Ryan. I guess we can go to Chief Spinney if you want to go first and talk about the reduction we made in your budget and what your thoughts would be at this point. If somebody can unmute him, I don't know if he's muted.
I did.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. Like the manager said, there are a lot of unknowns. When I came forward several months ago, I put forth the budget that I felt was necessary to run the police department in an optimal, efficient manner. And part of that was an increase in the overtime budget. I'm glad we're not losing officers. We are below the federal guidelines as it is. So obviously that would be a last resort. With the current proposal, $100,000 has been removed from the police department budget. So will we be able to provide a safe police force? Yes, but there will be drawdowns. There will be issues with community policing pullbacks with foot patrols and bike patrols. There will be pullbacks on some of our security initiatives across the community, where we help churches and businesses with workplace safety presentations. Those will be impacted. The unknowns are, a major crime in town would require major deployment of resources, detectives, extra officers on scene. one or two of those in a budget cycle can have a significant impact. So I guess we have to hope for the best. Not to say that we couldn't pivot and readjust within the fiscal year. The loss of the cruiser, that's more manageable. I would not want to see that go more than 1 or 2 cycles. Cruisers are an important piece of safety equipment. Those cruises put sometimes in excess of 50,000 miles in 1 year. And to run a cruiser beyond 1 cycle, you get to a point where you're spending more money just to maintain the unit than you would to replace it. Not to mention the safety aspects of the vehicle when they start to be, you know, that type of mileage on them for the way they're driven. So I will do the best I can to manage this reduction. At the end of the day, as things stand now, the complement is not affected. My intent is to have the same amount of officers on the street that are on now, but 1 or 2 unforeseen events that require a significant expenditure for resources could have an impact deeper than what we're looking at here. So,
Chief Ryan, you want to chime in?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
No. Yes.
Okay, thank you. As you may recall, I had a budget that I presented back in March that was presented a 4.3% decrease. So the revision included an additional 115,000, and where that reduction came from, 25,000 came out of my overtime, 90,000 came out of positions. And what I mean by that is currently we're down 4 firefighter positions. The town manager just mentioned that the town services are lean. We are lean. We've had a number of retirements. I've talked about that at the presentation. We've had 4 unfilled. I was in the process of hiring 2 when everything was shut down. So my intention is to go ahead and fill 2 of those positions and leave 2 unfilled. So the impact of the Chelmsford Fire Department with these cuts, you're looking at 2 unfilled positions, plus you're looking at potentially a station closing sometime this summer. I will do my best to keep it open for July. That's engine 5 because of Hart Pond, but I will have to reassess after the end of July based on injuries, people out on vacation. That's usually the heaviest amount of overtime. So I will reassess my budget at the end of July. If I have to shut the station down, it's about $1,000 for a 24-hour overtime shift. So for 1 month, I could save $30,000. But again, I will have to reassess at the end of July.
So Station 5 would be the one you'd be targeting?
Station 5 will be the one I will be targeting, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, sorry, for both chiefs, Chief Ryan, I think I heard you say out of your cuts, 25,000 was the reduction in overtime. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then Chief Spinney, you said, I think 100,000 reduction. Was that your overall budget or just the overtime piece?
100,000 was taken out of the overtime line.
Okay, thank you. So
I would like to, if I may add though, Mr. Chairman, like I said a few months ago, much of that overtime increase that I had asked for was a result of mandated training with everything affecting our society today. So some of those things are unavoidable. So it is going to be a challenge, but you know, that's the mission ahead. So.
Thank you. Paul, if that's 125,000 between the fire and police, what else is in public safety that makes up the difference of the 475?
It's basically their overall personnel line. I mean, we'll be voting them the block amount of funding, public safety personnel. But again, when I looked at level service to where we are today, that's the total level of reductions going forward. So again, you know, Gary says there's 2 bodies in there. You know, in one way or another, if we're not changing, if we're not laying off anybody, then the savings would come in the form of overtime because we're not going to let anybody go. That's how it all comes out in terms of, as opposed to, you know, reducing people, you know, positions and doing layoffs. So that's why I lumped it in as overtime as an aggregate comment.
Okay, thank you.
Did you see a large drop in overtime in the last 2 months where we were all sheltering in place?
On behalf of the police department, I can just say that we made modifications in the patrol shifts due to our priority to keep officers well and keep the department functioning at an optimal level. So we had a pretty significant reduction in overtime usage over the last 2 months. We have since returned to regular shifts. I'm glad to say no officers are sick, nor did they become sick. So we accomplished our goal. But to answer your question, yes, I saw a significant reduction in overtime because part of the arrangement for the modification was no shift replacement. And all the training across the state has been basically canceled. So all of our expenses that would have went towards training has also been delayed. So that was a factor also in reduced overtime.
If I could jump in, we actually increased overtime. Back in March, when we were talking about the surge and not knowing how this was going to have an impact on public safety and medical responses, I actually put on 2 additional firefighters in the center station to staff the rescue. Not only to respond, but there's a significant impact to the level of personal protective equipment that we have to put on. It's almost like going to a hazmat scene. And Chief Spinney could probably talk about one of his officers had to go into a nursing home, and we basically had to decon that officer. So that takes a significant amount of time to put on the equipment, to take it off, and to clean it. So with that in mind, I did put on 2 additional firefighters back probably around St. Patrick's Day, and they've been on through the rest of the year this year. So we're looking over $100,000 increase to our overtime budget. But with that said, the town manager did allude earlier to the coronavirus aid package that we will be submitting for that should be covered under that provision.
Exactly. Yeah, it will be. So that's where, you got to be careful. Gary said, those are people who weren't hired, wouldn't be staffed, but for COVID-19, the pandemic. So therefore that's a legitimate expense. And then Downey will submit that for reimbursement to the state because, as I said, there's $3 million out there. So again, that we will be audited, so we've got to be able to document pre-COVID staffing levels, post-COVID staffing levels, but what he speaks to is the fact that that additional staffing will be fully reimbursed to the town. In fact, we'll get that money before the close of this fiscal year. So again, it won't hit our fund balance.
Okay, thank you.
If there are no further questions on the operating budget, we can move on. Article 7 is air quality studies. That's a citizen petition. I recall because I was in the room. You've heard that presentation.
Yes.
And I believe Mr. Hall has been invited to Monday night selectmen's meeting if you want a refresher on that. So again, I won't spend any time on that at this point in time. Article 8 is the Finance Committee Reserve Fund at $400,000. Again, given how tight we are in terms of these items we're all talking about in terms of overtime, snow and ice, and so forth, I believe the 400,000 should remain intact, and we'll probably need it, and perhaps even more. So that's the reserve fund under Article 8. So that's unchanged from what we presented back. Article 9 is the capital budget. John presented that earlier. So we then move to Article 10, which is the South Road School partial roof replacement. Again, we're seeking an additional $116,000 for the completion of the South Road School roof. Again, I presented this back in January, but again, the initial appropriation of $400,000 at the fall annual town meeting. We're going to get a 50% reimbursement for that. The approved project budget is $516, so hence why the $116,646 or roughly $120,000. And it's just the additional cost result of the contingencies and overhead of participating in the state program. Gary Persichetti's on the line. I'll ask him to give you an update in terms of the good news we've had with that project thus far, because with the school closure, we were able to get an early start on that project.
All right. Hello. Yes, we did get a great start on it. As a matter of fact, all the 4 sections of roof that were to be removed are done as far as the actual roof itself goes. We're down to skylights, which are the longest lead item. They're probably still another 3 to 4 weeks out on that. We're down on the trim, downspouts and scuppers to be done. And then we have 4 exhaust fans on the roof and a compressor that have to be worked on. So the project is going well. The project right now is standing right where it should be on budget. It's not below and it's not above at this point in time. And as you know, because it's an MSBA project, we have a project manager, which was brought in from them, and that happens to be Jacobs. Russo Bar is the engineer on site, and then through MSBA, you have to have a commissioning agent. So everybody's been on site doing their job. The commissioning agent has just finished her second report and submitted that on yesterday. So with the amount of work that's done, I'd imagine that we should be done pretty much, other than maybe the skylights, probably around the same time as town meeting.
Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome.
All right. So again, that's Article 10. Article 11 is a charter amendment that's proposed by the Board of Selectmen that would increase the Board of Health from 3 to 5 members.
On that charter amendment, Paul, do we have, I think I saw Virginia's on, she's our liaison. Do they have any comment on that increase as to why they're looking to do that? I haven't heard much discussion.
The selectmen are scheduled to discuss the articles on Monday night, so my sense is we'll have a discussion on Monday, and then perhaps the chair or Virginia or one of the or other members can come to you on Thursday night, discuss that more fully.
Okay. Yeah, Virginia, I'll reach out to Ken and have him attend too.
He had said he would like to come talk to the finance committee when you're ready.
Perfect. So yeah, before we vote on next Thursday, I'll reach out to Ken and let him know. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Article 12 is the sewer enterprise fund operating budget. Again, this would be in the consent agenda. Again, it's basically an unchanged budget of $3.94 million. If you go to the next slide, you can just see that the amount of increase is 0.43%. It's basically, you know, your salary increases and miscellaneous situation. So again, that's why we put in the consent agenda pretty unchanged. As we know, we've had several years in a row of unchanged sewer rates and so forth. So it's a good stable. And then Article 13 is the Milan Avenue Sewer Pump Station. We're requesting a transfer of $350,000 from sewer enterprise fund free cash for the construction of the sewer pump station. You may recall at fall town meeting, we appropriated $25,000 for the engineering and design. The station was conducted back in 1995, so it's lived its useful life. And obviously by what we experienced this summer, and we'll talk about later, we really want to stay ahead of the sewer pump and sewer infrastructure. Again, so that's what it looks like today, and that's what it'll look like when it's all done. And again, those are images you saw at fall town meeting. Article 14 is the Stormwater Management Enterprise Fund.
I'm just going to ask everyone's patience. I'm just going to bring up
the file was so large that
the second half of this presentation.
Email it out effectively. But what we've done with stormwater management, and I said this last week at the tri-board meeting, we're not adding what was to be the third and final step of the phase-in of the program, which is the long-winded way of saying we're not adding any additional personnel, which would have been that last work crew that the study and all the work indicated that we need on an ongoing basis. And again, this is a way of providing some relief to the business community, which is most impacted by this because of the square footage. And so again, we worked, with DPW. We have some additional funding in the budget for projects and so forth. So we think we'll adhere to the guidelines, but it's sort of an extension of I guess what we call prolonged phase 2 for this program. But we are requesting the $200,000 in that appropriation. The personnel and the expenses are just 1.1 million, but we are requesting the $200,000 for the catch basin cleaner vehicle, which is again a component of stormwater management that we believe that we cannot defer. And if we defer it, we really have to contract for that service. And so again, we're going to perform that work with our own vehicle and our own personnel. And so again, we're now 2 years into the effectiveness of these new regulations, and so again, we're going to extend ourselves out, for an additional year at this point in time under stormwater. So John's still trying to pull up that file. So that's where we are on stormwater. We then go to Article 15, which is the Forum Enterprise Fund. Again, that's a consent item. It's just reauthorizing the operations of the forum to an enterprise fund. The 110,000 has remained constant for years, so that will stay constant. Article 16 is the ice chiller refrigeration system replacement. We're taking no action on that. We've done some repairs that we think can get us for a couple more years, so we'll probably come back at a future town meeting so there'll be no action to Article 16. So that's in addition to the consent agenda on that expenditure. Article 17, again, continues the consent agenda. That's the PEG access and cable related enterprise fund. It's $602,000. Again, there's no staffing or personnel changes at Telemedia. The revenue, we see the revenue come in quarterly and from Verizon and Comcast, from the 4.5% assessment on cable television bills. And really, despite the cutting of the cord, cable access revenues have remained within the budgeted forecast levels. And I guess obviously with people staying at home longer, that's probably helping maintain the internet connections and probably some of the cable programming as well. So that's that article. Article 18 is the Telemedia computer servers. Again, Peak was in. It's just a $20,000 purchase to have permanent storage of their archived materials for television promotion under Article 18. I probably could have put this as a consent agenda item, but again, where it was a small purchase from the fund, again, it's funded from the cable access operation under Article 18. If you then, John, can slide us up to Article 19, golf course, again, that remains constant at $30,000. We're pleased that the golf course is reopened. Things are going fine there. Obviously, the greens, since they weren't used, and fairways were in great shape, and now we're able to utilize individual carts, by an individual user, and so things are at least having some activity at the golf course. And so, again, the function facility is not taking place, but the budget remains constant and would be fine at the $30,000 level. And the Article 20 is the revolving funds. Again, that's just the annual authorization. None of these levels have changed. And in fact, as you can imagine, a number of these programs have been lessened in terms of the senior citizen trip program and the respite care. Again, there's no appropriation here. It's just an amount not to exceed. So again, we're fine. And that's a consent agenda item. Article 21 is another consent agenda item. It's the cemetery improvement. Again, this comes every fall and spring. It's for the improvement of the cemetery. We see all that construction taking place now at River Neck and Route 129. If you get down River Neck, you can see the progress they are making in terms of the ongoing expansion of the cemetery. So again, they have the funding in the account. They're continuing their measured approach to completing that expansion. Article 22 is the Community Action Program Fund. Again, that's a $10,000 for these individual community projects. So again, this has been in effect since '97. The $10,000, it's really a de minimis article, but it does support a lot of good organizations within the community. So that brings us to Article 23, which is the Cranberry Bog Dam tree removal and maintenance. There's a request here for $25,000. The Conservation Commission did a study in terms of the condition of the dam at the bog and determined that the structural integrity of the dam is diminished by the fact that there are trees mature trees growing in that cranberry bog dam. And so by appropriation of $25,000, the contractor will be hired to remove the large growth trees and brush along the crest and both the upstream and downstream sides of the earthen embankment dam to preserve that, because obviously if we lose that structure, it's going to be quite a cost to replace it. So again, that's remaining going forward at this town meeting. We then transition to Article 24, which is the Community Preservation Fund. Again, this is unchanged from what you heard back in January. This article, just presents the amount of money that's needed to fund the debt service, $50,000 for administrative expenses, and putting the necessary amounts into the budgeted reserves per the Community Preservation Act. So again, there's no new appropriations here. It's an article in slide. If you go a couple of slides, you can see there's our estimated surcharge of $1.4 million. We'll see what the state revenue is. I mean, obviously, there's not a lot of activity taking place at the Registry of Deeds, but again, we know with the 1.235 is a solid number. And again, with the next slide shows you the 140 that has to be put into the buckets and the balance in the budgeted reserves. And then the important thing is the next slide, as you can see, this is the debt schedule, the $662,000 that's requested. And the most notable thing is that we have our largest debt expiring in this upcoming fiscal year for the town hall projects. So that $2.8 million bond will be paid off next fiscal year, which will free up $272,000, which would really help the fund going forward. Because now at that point, you're at roughly $400,000 of debt service going forward. Because remember, it's a downward funding debt cycle, unlike a mortgage on these projects. But what you will see is there is some active consideration for some open space preservation. The Board of Selectmen have received a couple Chapter 61A notifications, and then there's another parcel that's being examined. So the timing is probably good in terms of the Community Preservation Fund at this point. And then the next article, Article 25, is the only appropriation requested under Community Preservation. And I know the town clerk gave that presentation to you a few months ago, the $450,000 for the preservation of the town's vital records. I've taken just a few pictures of her slides just as a visual reminder for you and for those watching. You've got about $80,000 for the sub-basement 03. And there's photos there of the materials that need to be archived, again, to prevent their loss due to conditions. And then the next slide is the Historical Commission cabinets, the $200,000 of archiving work that's foreseen there. And then, the next slide shows you these condition of tax books that, again, are irreplaceable and would be preserved through this effort. And the final slide would be the work that's in the town clerk's vault. So that comprises the total appropriation for that. And again, as John noted earlier, we're in a place now where we're really preserving and protecting and enhancing our vital records. And it's clearly the CPC has the funding to do this. The final two articles have to do with road easements. One is for Ledge Road and Oak Hill Road. That's to install the bus turnaround at the end of Ledge Road at the intersection of Oak Hill Road to allow safety on that road in terms, because there's been a significant increase in truck traffic in that neighborhood, and this would allow the school bus to get down Ledge Road and then turn around, so that way students wouldn't have to walk along the roadways. And this is certainly a less expensive option than it would be to actually construct sidewalks. And then the final one are easements that are needed for a state-funded project at Boston Road and Concord Road for the intersection redesign. That project will be bid in July upon the subsequent approval of these easements that you can see are in a few hundred square feet on various parcels along that area. So again, it's just the formal taking that's needed for that project. So again, those are all the articles for the town meeting. And then, as was noted, there is a need, as I mentioned last week, for a special town meeting warrant article that I'm asked the Board of Selectmen to sign on Monday evening, and that's to fund the repairs to the Southwell pumping station main break that occurred several weeks ago in the middle of this beginning of this crisis. the cost was just over $710,000. And basically we would fund that again from sewer enterprise fund, free cash, which is basically retained earnings from prior years, to close that book out for the current fiscal year. And then you say, gee, that's a big expense. As you may recall, that pipe was, 20 feet down in the ground, and there's a few photos. There's the break pipe right there that was near the pump station. You can just see how it corroded all the way through. Fortunately, piping in that area was examined, and that was an anomaly. But you can see on the photo on the left is what it's like when you can see how they're damming off all the area. And then on the right is what happens when they get down there. And you can see the ladder is an indication of the depth and you can see the main that's repaired down there. And then but in addition to that, the final photos show that they had to do a temporary connection while that, as a bypass. And you could, in order to do those repairs so that the sewer flow would continue. And you can see it was the same thing. You had to go down to that bypass depth. You can see by the railroad tracks, which is where those vehicles in the first photo on the left are parked. And you had to do these irrigation wells to dry out the area in addition to the shoring in order to perform that work. So it ended up taking as much time to do the temporary connection as it did the permanent repair. But that was the guidance and requirements from the DEP. So that would be the last action at town meeting, hopefully that Monday evening, the 22nd. As you can see, there's no zoning articles. The financial articles are easy to understand, and I guess I'd share the aspirations of the moderator that we can likely complete hopefully this action on one evening on the 22nd. So again, I can answer any questions that you may have on the articles, budget, and again, we've got department heads from library, public works, police, fire, finance, who can answer any questions or concerns you may have.
Paul, for the takings, especially on the second set of takings at Boston and Concord, do we have assessed values and amounts that are going to go out yet? Has that process been done? Are we are we long in that process to provide for compensation?
Yeah, we have that, and I'll get the map in as well. That's, you can put that in your book in terms of that shows all the little areas, but it's not it's not material in terms of we'll absorb it in the current bond and funding articles for roadways and sidewalks that we have under the current fiscal year. So we'll be fine. We're not going to ask for an appropriation on that account.
Okay, good. Any further questions?
Nope. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Paul. All right, next on our agenda, we have a discussion of voting and reporting. So as we alluded to earlier and discussed a couple times during the meeting, we're on a very abridged schedule here. Luckily, we'd gone through most of the grunt work prior to COVID-19 hitting and ending our in-person meetings. And so now that we've heard from the school departments, and we'll get an updated number and a discussion from the Chelmsford Public Schools next week, we're in a pretty good position, I think, to go ahead and do our voting next week. It's going to be another one of our marathon sessions where we go through, although, as Paul just mentioned, it's not as heavy lifting a set of articles as we've seen in the past. So hopefully we'll be able to go through relatively quickly after we've had, again, a quick update presentation from Jay, and then also Kenneth, the Board of Selectmen, on their article regarding the Board of Health increase. So I know there's been some discussion about timing, and we could certainly, I don't know what the availability for people is next week, what their schedules look like. If we wanted to start potentially earlier, we could certainly reach out to Chelmsford Telemedia, see if there's any conflict in scheduling. Paul, I don't know if there's anything on your end that would prevent that from happening, maybe just starting a half hour earlier or even an hour earlier, just in recognition of the fact that most of us will still be coming from remote locations, but not locations where we have to quickly drive to. if we are able to do that, we might actually get out of that meeting prior to midnight, as we've seen in the past. So I don't know, Paul, if that presents any conflict that you foresee.
No, not aware of any concerns with starting earlier, no.
Okay, I'll quickly reach out to Pete just to make sure there's no conflict in their schedule. And then if we can, everyone want to target maybe 6:30 next week to try to get this done sooner? Does that work for everybody on the committee?
Yes, works for me.
That's fine with
Works
me.
for me.
I'm
Yep.
fine.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So having said that, is there any other discussion about the voting process or reporting? Reporting again is going to have to be done quickly. I don't imagine that the chairman's letter will be as involved as it has been in the past, just given the what we're dealing with this year. But I think as far as production is concerned, we'll be posting the PDF as we always do on the town website with our recommendations and the overall discussion and our votes. As far as publication of these books, I imagine we still need to provide that for town meeting representatives, even though we're going to have a different sort of meeting this year. I don't think there's anything that would prevent us from doing that sort of printing. I think it's still a requirement, correct, Paul?
Yeah, and Pete just responded, there's no conflict on the telemedia calendar.
Perfect.
I just, yeah, no, we should be able to get those books printed. And again, where the town offices are open, if the reps want to come by, we will make them available to them in advance of the meeting.
Perfect. Okay. Any other discussion on the voting reporting? All right. Seeing none, we have public comment. Do we have any public comment? We still have some public here. All right, seeing none and not seeing any press, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
A second. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week at a new time of 6:30.
Thank you. See you then.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Night.
Sad.